So, what's up, brother? Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's been a very busy week. It feels like the energies are very much unsettled at the moment, as our son has been recently.
Well, many things have been recently. Obviously, the social dynamic is not settled.
That's right. Absolutely.
You're in Texas, correct?
I am, sir. I am the great state of.
The great state of. Well put.
Right.
And yeah, like obviously you guys are experiencing a level of freedom that us here in Canada are not. And
That's right.
you know, it's a pretty significant thing. But let's aside from that, and when eventually we do get to that. So I'm not sure how many of these episodes you've watched, but I have this. It's not a rule. It's just a way to get around the algorithms that might catch us talking about stuff they don't want us to talk about.
Okay.
So the current affliction we're calling the joy. The solution to the affliction we're calling a lollipop. And then there are other people who don't want that solution that we're calling sugar-free. So just for terminology, that's kind of what we're using. But aside from all of that, this podcast is basically me collecting stories, conversations with people like yourself that I find personally interesting and have got to know over the years and admire and respect. And obviously, my audience doesn't know who the fuck you are.
That's
so,
right. They don't.
Like with anybody else, let's start from the beginning. If you could, just let the audience know, who is Mark and how did he get where he is today?
Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, well, you said that we were going to be talking today on a podcast that's kind of normative, kind of more mainstream. So I guess I will keep it that way. I am a military brat and veteran who has been in education for many years. I'm a father with 4 children, and I am someone who's been interested in politics and geography and the nature of the world and of life and of everything therein for quite some time, from quite a young age. So I found myself in quite a few different places. You know, I've lived in 14 or 15 states. I've traveled through all of them except for maybe 3. I've lived in Canada, your country, for a couple of years, and I've also lived overseas in Europe as well. I am now currently living in the great state of Texas, in Central Texas, deep in the heart, the jewel of Texas, the city of San Marcos, where I have served politically on my city council. And I am also a teacher. I teach high school English at Del Valley High School, which is outside of Austin, Elon Musk's new hangout and the location of his gigafactory. So we are what they call now Silicon Hills, which is where everyone from California is fleeing. And we're seeing that type of development moving down here into the heart of Texas. So
how has that been actually? Like, I know, like I follow Joe Rogan's podcasts, a lot of comedians, a lot of celebrities have been kind of flocking to Texas to escape the ridiculous mandates of California and Los Angeles. So what have you seen in terms of change within, you know, Texas in general, but where you are?
Texas is free. Texas has generally had a different atmosphere than many other states as far as the administration of the state and the attitude of the people who live within it is concerned. And that's kind of a traditional way of being in Texas. But, you know, my county, Hays County, where San Marcos is, has been the fastest growing county in the entire United States, according to the census from 2010 to 2020. So we have seen a population increase that is just beyond all sense, right? And it's people coming from everywhere, coming from out of state, coming from California and many other places to come here to Central Texas, to Austin, to San Antonio, and to the beautiful Hill Country, which is amazing. If you've never been here, you need to get down here, man, because it's really nice. But how it's been, it has seen a shift in our politics, obviously, because a lot of folks coming from California are probably more on the liberal side of things. So we're seeing a lot of our counties and cities here in the I-35 corridor, which is, you know, the highway that runs from Mexico all the way up through the United States. It's a trafficking zone, you know, and we live on that corridor. And this area is becoming what they call a megalopolis complex. So it's just going to become a gigantic city. You know, there's less green space in between San Antonio and Austin. And we here in San Marcos, and most people who've lived here and who come from here are viewing it all with concern as the culture is shifting here in Central Texas. Some of it's good, but some of it not so good, especially on the development side of things.
What would you say would be the main concern?
The main concern as far as development, we are a city that's about 70,000 people, San Marcos is, according to the last census numbers, which was a bit of an undercount. But we are seeing development coming in that is being led by folks from outside of San Marcos. So we've got businesses and buildings that are being built here that do not fit with the character of our town. And we've got successful neighborhoods that are being kind of divided by new developments occurring within the neighborhood. So we've got long-term residents who are seeing the city change around them and they're not happy about it. So we're seeing a war between different factions in town, just like we see occurring every place else in Central Texas, in Texas in general, and in the nation in general. And some of it is along the lines of politics, but a lot of it really has more to do with the things that people hold in common and really love in regards to living in a place like this, which is really, really beautiful. And it's really kind of a natural preserve. And here's something you might not know. This city is a Garden of Eden location for Native Americans, the Cobbletecan people who have lived here since time immemorial. Our springs are considered to be a creation springs, where their people came from the underworld to inhabit the planet. So it's a very special place. So not only Native Americans believe it, but those of us who live here believe it as well.
Very nice. Yeah, like I would imagine that, you know, you've got that kind of progressive left from California, and they're moving into what was kind of more predominantly a right-wing area of the world, right? Like obviously Texas kind of runs its own things, but, you know, pro-guns, pro-freedom.
That's right.
Right? So
yeah.
I would imagine all that wokeism, as it's called, carrying over to Texas is probably pissing a lot of Texans off in a lot of ways.
It does, you know, and the quintessential Texas character has generally been held in common by folks on the left and the right for the most part. But as we see outside influences coming in, of course, it's taking on more of the tenor of the national debate and the national distinctions between the two sides. And the characterization of wokeism is something that has appeared here and that has caused schisms in our population. Some of the things that they've talked about, in particular police reform, have been something that we have had to take on. In fact, you know, I got on the wrong side of the police officers at one point during my time on city council because I actually did work for criminal justice reform. But this was before last summer, before 2020 summer, right? So we had already been dealing with these issues before it became a national concern to the extent that George Floyd made it so. But yeah, we are seeing those types of issues here in San Marcos as we are along the corridor. You know, the Biden bus, this was the city where all that drama happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, San Marcos was where it all went down.
What about the homeless population where you are? Is that becoming a bigger problem?
In Austin, it has been a major issue, and the governor, Greg Abbott, and the mayor of Austin have been at war over it for quite some time. But Austin does have a pretty serious homeless problem, and we have seen some of that come down to San Marcos, but it's not too large right now. We've only got between 100 and 200 homeless people documented so far. And I was also on the homeless committee when I was on city council as well. So I was tapped into all of those type things.
Very nice. So what drove you to politics and what has been your role in that?
Well, there was a city council member here, Melissa Derrick, who just stepped down, and I was running for his seat, and I just lost my election by 29 votes last week, November the 2nd, right? But she found me online on Facebook back in 2016, and, you know, she had been my friend for a while, and one day she just messaged me and asked me, hey, Mark, why don't you sit on the Ethics Review Commission, right? And the Ethics Review Commission, you deal with ethics issues in the city. If someone brings a complaint against the city or against any of the workers and things like that, and you fashion ethics ordinances and things like that, which we did. We fashioned a lobbying ordinance while I was there, and we fashioned a campaign finance ordinance as well. The campaign finance ordinance passed city council. The lobbying ordinance is still pending. But in 2018, the same person and groups of people from my community, in my church community, I am a Unitarian Universalist. And so a group of folks from there came to me. I'm also connected with the Native American community here, the Indigenous Cultures Institute. Their founders came to me, and individuals from around town came to me, and they asked me to run for public office in 2018. And I didn't have anything else to do, so I was like, sure, why not?
Well, that's probably the best way it could go, right? You've got, the native population, the popular population asking you to take that role. It's a little hard to say no to, right? Like,
well, it was never something that I was interested in. My sister, she's a political scientist, a doctor, and she's been engaged with politics since her college days. So it was always something that was her thing. So, I have been on the outside and on the fringes and exploring all of creation and the possibilities and all this kind of stuff for all of my life. And so I keep abreast of politics, of course. I'm a geographer by training, so political geography is something I've always been interested in, as I'm interested in religion and every other aspect of society, physical and social. So I've been aware, and I am kind of tapped in as far as those things are concerned, but I never thought of myself as a politician. And so when it finally came up, I was bemused. But, I wasn't adverse to it, because if people ask you to run and they're serious about it and they think that you can do it and you think that you can do it, I thought I could do it. I was like, sure, let me do it. Let me try it.
Very nice. And have you enjoyed it?
No.
No. Thank you for the honest answer.
No, I have not enjoyed it, because people think you're a politician when you're a politician, They think you're a politician. And
it's
people...
like marking yourself, right?
Yeah. It's like marking yourself. People think that you do what they do, and that you're going to lie, and that you're going to cheat, and that you're going to take things under the table, and that you're not really going to stand up for people's interests and all that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of reputation you get. And when people know that you're doing that, they treat you differently. They begin to treat you like that, those people who feel that. And so there's a certain derision and a certain disrespect that comes with that, and that can be a little bit, that could be a little bit of something that you have to get used to after a while and learn to work with and work through and around. But then other people who know you and know what you really stand for and that you really do want to work for the people, they kind of have your back and they support you. And I think over the 2 years I was on city council, a lot of people saw that I was not just words, that I was about action. And a lot of people saw by the enemies that I made that I really was standing up for the people. And they saw how I lost, during the 2020 election. And they saw everything that happened around that, as well as, my engagement with the police. And people have actually come around even more. And even though I lost this last election, I don't really consider it a loss, because an extraordinary effort was made on the other side in one particular precinct to up the vote from beyond a midterm vote, which is teeny tiny. This one neighborhood came out at 40%, right? So they tipped the whole thing. And the guy only beat me by 29 points or 29 votes. So I feel really good about the fact that I seem to have the solid support of a good proportion of our citizenry here in the city of San Marcos.
Well, that should be what matters, right? At the end of the day, being a politician, you could have the support of all the industry, all the corporations and everything in your particular area. That's all well and good. It might help you win your election. But I think what you want is the people's support, right?
I don't have that kind of support. I don't have support from the Chamber of Commerce. I don't have support from the developer interests in town, because they see me as running counter to their interests. They see me as a populist. And some of that has more to do with the color of my skin and them believing that I'm woke and, that I stand for all of the progressive stances, and I want to defund the police, and I want to densify the city and all this other kind of stuff that is their impressions kind of put on me, right? So when people listen to me, when people talk to me, when people find out who I am and what I really stand for, then they support me on both sides of the aisle because, you know, I have beliefs and understandings about the nature of reality in the world that transcend political party.
That makes sense. And this defund the police movement has really hit Texas as far as I've heard.
Right.
So
Yes.
how is it in your area? Is like, I've heard about Austin, how they're like kind of not doing anything about a certain level of crime. It's like, unless you hit here, we're just going to ignore you. Is it the same kind of where you are?
Right. Well, the ordinance that we passed in San Marcos was called Cite and Release, and it is a ordinance that was actually on the books at the state level for years, since 2008. And what it says is that people who have Class C misdemeanors shouldn't necessarily be arrested. We're talking about things that have to do with like driving with a license that's expired, or missing a court date, and things like that, small misdemeanors. And so police arrest people for those things generally. And when they do so, they're taking up their own time in regards to how much time they can spend on the streets or pursuing more serious crimes. And so we took that suggestion from the state level and we made an ordinance. And we said that they cannot arrest people on Class C misdemeanors and some Class B and some Class A misdemeanors. And those are primarily theft under $300 and graffiti and things like that, right? So it's nothing violent, nothing immediate. And don't make any mistake, this divided our town, but these are times and situations where people do still come in. They still do have a court date. They still get fingerprinted and all that kind of stuff, but they're not arrested on the spot. So they don't necessarily lose their jobs and, you know, fail to pick up their kids and things like that often happen when somebody's taken by the cops off the street for small crimes that are generally not crimes, violent crimes, or crimes where somebody is hurt.
So would you think, like, when I'm hearing that, I'm like, that sounds good, right? Like that sounds like a positive thing. How has it actually worked in practice for you guys?
It's been working.
It has been?
It's been, well, all right, let me modify that. We're in a pandemic. And so when we passed this in March of 2020, we were in the depths of lockdown, right? So crime went down drastically because of that. So we don't really have a good understanding of the numbers from that period until we came out of lockdown. But as you know, I'm sure crime is going up in many areas, especially in violent crime areas. And we have seen a bit of that increase here in San Marcos as well. So people reacted according to political party and according to what was going on in the nation after, what was it, May of 2020 when George Floyd was killed up in Minnesota. So all of a sudden, even though we've been working on this for a year and a half in San Marcos and we passed it in March, you know, I was the only city council member running for re-election during all of that. And I was the chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee. And so the police were able to concentrate all of their energies and all of their money. And they got money from the state level to come after me, and they did. They came after me hardcore on social media and in campaigns around town.
In what way?
You know, they came up with one graphic that looked like a mugshot, and they had me and some others who had voted for it. And they said, do you want someone who's peeping in on your daughter to get off, you know, and not go to jail? You know, do you want someone who has stolen your lawnmower to not go to jail? You know, things like that. And they were saying, well, Rockeymoore, you know, he has a criminal record because I was arrested back in 2005 on a Class C misdemeanor. And so he just wants the criminals to run the world. And so he's a criminal and he's supporting criminals. And so don't vote for the criminal, right? So they did all of that. And that election was so intense in our nation, as you know, and as everybody knows, that I was able to be lumped in with folks who don't necessarily believe the same thing as I do. And they got away with it. I lost my election and I was off city council from that point.
Did they more or less couple you with Trump and that whole thing?
Yeah, they did. So it was the national election, and a lot of people who didn't know who I was and what I stood for, who don't generally vote, who voted, of course, in the national election, and they didn't know who was on local politics. So many people didn't even vote. I think there was like 3,000 or 4,000 people who voted for president who didn't vote at the bottom of the ballot for local elections. So a lot of people who didn't know came in, they voted for my opponent because his name was first on the ballot, and they didn't know who either of us were. And so I lost based upon a lot of ignorance in people trying and doing their civic duty.
It's so disappointing that even at that level, the color of your fucking skin matters.
Oh,
right? Like,
I said I was in Texas, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just gross.
Yeah.
I've known you for a long time. You and I know each other through an avenue that is very spiritual and whatnot. So I know where your heart is. Like, I know you're none of those things, right? Like, you're none of, I don't give a fuck what color your skin is. I don't, any of that. I don't give a fuck who you voted for, which political party. Like, I get you, I know you. And I think that it's just unfortunate that in like political senses, we don't really get to know the individual like that. We get like a media spin of it, like say with Trump, which is like orange man bad. And then the opposite with Biden, where it was like fucking savior, here we go. But he's going to poop his pants and he's going to talk in circles. Right? So
they didn't say that part of it.
It's really disappointing.
Well, I think that when it comes down to it, politics is disappointing, especially when it is in a polarity. And a polarity never fully represents what the people truly want, because people are all parts of everything. You may have people on the far right who are anti-racist, but who believe that there are forces from outside who are coming in to infiltrate America, right? You may have people on the left who, you know, believe in spirituality and God and don't want ladies to get an abortion. But at the same time, they believe that there is a threat coming from the right as far as racism and taking America back to days that none of us want to return to, right? So you've got folks who are a bit of each, but there's nothing that encompasses that in our system like there is in other systems. Parliamentary systems primarily, where you have different parties that represent these viewpoints, and the parties have to come to agreements about rulership in the nation, you know, about how they're going to form a government and all that kind of stuff. It lends a nuance to governing that you don't see here in the United States. It's like the United States with our Democrats and our Republicans, it's just, you know, walking heavily with a big ass stick, right? And just hitting each other over the head and saying, we're going this way, then we're going this way, you know. It's like a seesaw. We just seesaw between extremes because of it. So
officially, what category did they put you in?
They put me in Democrat officially because I support most civil rights issues. So that's what they call me, and that's generally what I stand for in regards to the equality of all people. That's what I seek. As far as what I actually stand for, it's beyond politics, as you know. I am of the knowing that the world is changing irrevocably and that the system we currently have in place is untenable and that it has to go and that it's going to go sooner rather than later. And so I am preparing us in all of my efforts for what is coming and what is here, you know? So that's my base right there. That is fundamentally it. I don't give a damn about what party you're in. If we need to work together, then we fucking have to work together to prepare, if that's even possible, for where we're truly at in the world right now.
Absolutely. And so with the joy issue,
yes,
obviously it's been a while now. It's been like almost 2 years. We're coming up on the 2-year mark. You know, I'm Canadian, so I only hear things, but what it sounds like is Texas kind of just doesn't give a fuck. Is that true?
There was just a federal decision made at some court where they said that our governor's denial of the ability of school districts to have mask mandates was overturned. So now apparently there can be mask mandates in our schools. And I've been in a school district where there has been a mask mandate actually. So we were one of the ones that were kind of illegally going against the governor's orders. But there will be other school districts where they don't have mask mandates, and I'm sure they will remain the way that they are. But those school districts that do have them will continue to have the mask mandates. And, I'm not adverse to that. If people want what they feel is a form of safety, then let them go for it. As far as myself is concerned, I like to ingest prana through my nose. And so masks don't generally work for me.
What about the lollipop mandates there? How is that looking right now? There's none, right?
That's gonna be a war if they try to bring that to Texas, but there's none right now. And I can't foresee that happening unless we came to the revolution stage, I think that would be one of the last things to change this state.
Oh, that would be nasty business if
we
nasty
business.
There, right?
I was just
and that's like,
yeah.
There's a part of me that fears that, let's call it what it is, a civil war in the United States based on that. Like, you've got you guys in Texas, Florida on one end of things, and you've got states like California and New York on the other end of things, which is a lot more in line with what I'm dealing with here in Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of waiting, like, eventually this has to happen, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think at some level it has to happen, because our culture is violent. America's been in existence for 240 plus years, and we have been at war for 220 plus of those years, right? So we were a nation founded in revolution, founded in genocide, founded in slavery, and we have been fighting, and we have been, expanding outwards into the world ever since our origin, and that's not going to stop. And violence is a part of our nature. It's a part of the underlying strata within which we all swim, right? And so that's not going to dissipate. That's not going to disappear unless, the Galactic Federation comes and changes the nature of humanity. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Those fucking blue avians are not coming. But aside from that, yeah, I get it. It's very similar. Like here, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I've been kind of waiting for, what's the line that people draw? Is it a third dose? Is it a vaccine or a lollipop passport? Is it having to give your children lollipops? Right? Like, where does that line actually pop up for Canadians? I'm really curious. So it's been interesting for me from outside to watch states like Florida and states like Texas say, like, no, like, our line is way the fuck back there.
Right.
And you've already crossed it.
Yeah, it's gonna take something that will probably include violence for that to occur here in Texas, and probably in Florida as well. I know for sure here in Texas, because there are too many people who believe that the joy is not as bad as the lollipop, right? And so they think the lollipop is worse, and they're not going to want their children to get it, and they are not going to want it enforced at their places of work. So if it comes down to that, people will make a stand, I think, because they believe this is life and death, And when you get people back on their heels and you're threatening what they believe to be, something essential to their very beingness, then all they're going to be left with is violence. And if we make it to that stage, then that's what we'll see. Now, I'm not sure how prevalent it will be and how long it will last, and if it might be 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 events that occur nationwide that inflict such a sense of horror on the nation that we pull back from that brink. But I think it will be something along those lines. And whether it catches fire and spreads across the entire nation or not will depend upon the individual events themselves and how much they inflame the rest of the population on all sides of it,
Yeah, I mean, part of you would like to think, like, you've mentioned George Floyd a couple times now, like, the degree to which that blew up globally, right? You would hope, or maybe I should say, I would hope that this conflict with the joy and conflict with the lollipops and the lollipoppers versus the sugar-free and everything would probably follow suit. I mean, if you're going to get that passionate about one individual, how can you not be that passionate about thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of individuals who are out of work, put in a place that they don't want to be in, and coerced into something they don't want to do?
Yeah. Have you heard that story about the lobsters in the pot? And then the cook starts it real low and then turns it up slowly so that it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. But the lobster barely notices until it's too late and they're, cooking by that point. I think it's probably something of that nature where the the lollipop issue is something that doesn't seem as immediate as police violence, right? And so people are willing to put up with more and more and more until it comes to a point where it's too late. And they're like, wait a minute, these people are at my door right now, right? And then we're in it. And then it's put up or shut up. And we see where people truly stand. Because I think that following January 6th and everything, the debacle that's been going on at the national level in regards to what is to be done about this issue, people are being put in jail for long periods of time. And all of these things are interconnected, and there's no way to disconnect them in the mind of not just the United States or Canada, but the entire world right now. It's all, this battle for, I don't even know what to call it at this point. I don't even know if it's government related, if it's culture related, but it's something that draws us all in, no matter where we're all at, in the nation, or in the nation of the world, because these are issues that every country is facing in some form or fashion.
Well, yeah, this is obviously a global issue, right? And yeah. I think what fascinates me the most is that it's like a global issue that seems to be being handled globally, right? Like it does seem like everyone's kind of pulling the same cards out of their pocket and playing the same games. And to me, that seems really strange. I'm sure it probably does to you based on your education. This isn't normal.
This is not normal. And it does seem as if, there are cards being played that are common to the game of the world. Right. And these cards are being pulled out and plans are coming to fruition that seem to fulfill some sort of playbook. And, this is just where we're at as a world. And what we're doing is acting according to our natures. And there are people of different natures in the world. If we're going to live understanding that polarity is a real thing, although there are differences and there's gray in between the black and the white, then we know that polarity is always in conflict and that conflict moves from one side to the other side. It's a cycle, it's cyclical, right? So by looking at history and by looking at the nature of humanity and where we are right now, it's possible to see by the parameters of the conflict and the way things are moving underneath the scenes and behind the scenes and the things we're seeing occur around the world, in Africa, in Europe, in the United States and Canada. You can kind of tell where we're at in that playbook and what should be coming next.
Yeah. What has fascinated me the most about all of this is people's complete, I don't know if it's a lack of understanding or a lack of memory, but a definite disregard of history. Right? We have seen all of this happen before. I know that the joy sounds new to people, but it wasn't, right? Black people used to have their own version of the joy. Jewish people used to have their own version of the joy. Anyone who wasn't Russia had their own version of the joy. Everyone who wasn't Chinese had their own version of joy. Currently in our world, everyone who is not North Korean has their own version of the joy. So this isn't anything new. Nothing. It's just, to me, it's been fascinating to watch the acceptance of the joy and the acceptance of the division and the almost willingness to turn against fellow humans. And that's been the part for me that is kind of it gets my back up. It makes me angry. It makes me want to fight. It makes me want to do all kinds of crazy things because, and I mean, me, I fucking love people, right?
Yeah.
Like we're all on this fucking planet together. This planet is a fucking mess. So why are we fighting over who gets more land or who has more right to speak
Yeah.
or any of that stuff when like even the difference in my skin color and your skin color to me seems ridiculous, right? Like I didn't grow up that way. I've never had that thought in my mind. Like even today, like someone had asked me like who I'm doing my podcast with, and
Mm-hmm.
I go to describe you. So I'm describing you as like, how I met you, your title and what you do for a living, stuff like that. That's my way of describing you. And then I ended up showing them a picture of you and they're like, oh, he's a black guy. I'm
Like
like,
that's my essence.
I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't think in that terms. I'm not like, oh yeah, Mark's black, right? Like
Mhm.
obviously you are. But at the same time, that's when I think about you, I don't think about the fact that you're black. I don't think about the fact that your skin tone is different than my skin tone. I think about this dude from Texas that I know. He's got a gigantic heart. He's a fucking sweetheart. He's an awesome human being that I find really interesting and I love having conversations with. The fact that your skin color is different than mine didn't even play into my mind. I have two children. My youngest is just turned 15, and she says the same thing to me. She's like, Dad, like, what is racism?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I don't get it. Like, why do people have problems with other races? Like, I don't get it.
yeah.
And thankfully, we do have this generation of humans coming up with that in their head.
Yes, we do.
Thankfully, we do.
Yes, we
Right.
do. Thankfully,
And so I do think like 10 to 15 to 20 years from now, hopefully racism won't be a thing. But I mean, I'm sure you deal with it every day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a 6'4" Black man in America, you know. And so I've always had to deal with it from the time I was a small child. But, growing up on military bases, my father was in the Air Force for 20 years. I was born, the year he went in the Air Force, the year after he went in the Air Force. So I was basically a military brat for my entire youth. I held a dependent's ID until the time I was 18, 19 years old. And at that point, I went in the Army myself. So I traded my dependent ID for an active duty ID. But growing up on the military bases, I grew up around people of every shade, every race, every color. And in the military, expression of prejudice is legislated again, and it's literally illegal. You get fined money and you can lose rank if you express any type of racism. So living up on the bases, growing up in a diverse environment like that, as a kid, I had little idea of what the rest of the nation was like in any way other than what my parents had me learn as a child, reading in books, history books about the civil rights and what they told me about their stories in the 1960s and stuff like that. It was only when we lived off base in places like Oklahoma and Illinois that I really got to experience as a teenager and preteen what racism looked like, what hate looked like, And I got that from classmates and I got that from adults in the little towns that we lived in and stuff like that around the bases, And so as far as my experience is concerned, I know what it looks like when people get along, when people don't look at you based upon your race or based upon, these types of things that are only surface related. But at the same time, how can we make an entire society or an entire world see things that way, So when I do what I do, as far as politics is concerned, it's seeking to not recreate the world of the bases and the meritocracy of the military, even though that's the closest I've seen it ever work anywhere in our society. It's more like creating something even beyond that, because my father, he left the military based upon some racist shit that happened to him, somebody at the top level saying this officer is too good, let's get rid of him, if you can believe that. So I know that we have it within us to move beyond it. And I know that Gen Z, these children that we have are fucking amazing. I'm a 9th grade English teacher and I see them every day and they are so ready to take over this world. And, you know, a lot of adults, a lot of Gen Xers and boomers like to, you know, talk about them and say they're this and they're that and they're this, but they are perfectly suited for this world. You know, they are digital natives, and they are, the internet and everything electronic is like second nature to them. It's like a part of their bodies, you know. And so I have total faith and confidence in this generation and the millennials before them, their parents. And you're a millennial. No, you're Gen X, aren't you? You look so young.
I was born in 1980. So what would that make me?
Okay, that makes you Gen X. That makes you Gen X. The end.
My parents would be boomers, right? So yeah.
Your parents would be boomers.
And even with that in mind, like my minimum wage in Ontario, Canada right now is more hourly than I was raised by a stepdad, but more hourly than my stepdad made as a high wage when I was a kid. Right. Yeah. So that just shows you how far things have come. And at the time, like, you know, making what is now currently less than minimum wage, he was able to raise 3 kids with a house. Right. He owned a transport truck. You know, he had things. And here I am living in it's not a rooming house, but I share a house with other men to save on money because Toronto's so fucking expensive. And, you know, working full time, you can still barely pay your bills. Whereas like my stepdad, and I make more than minimum wage, right? So my stepdad was able to raise me on what is now less than minimum wage for me in an environment that is better than I have for myself today. So, you know, it's inflation is kind of crazy. None of this but is to your point about kids, like I said, I have a 15-year-old, I have a 22-year-old. My 15-year-old, I would give them the presidency. You know what I mean? Like, I would let them run this country because you're right. And I definitely see it with my youngest. So my youngest is big into computers. And I remember one time I had taken the oldest to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto here. And so I'm sitting with the youngest in like a waiting room. And at the time, I think she was 12 or 13. And she's having a conversation with two boys, 18 and 19 years old. And they're talking about computers and they're talking about coding. And it's all over my head. Like, I don't understand any of this conversation. And then, you know, it's going on for a while. And one of the fathers of one of the boys was there too. And he's listening to it just like I am. And like him and I can kind of keep giving each other these looks like, what the fuck is going on? Right. Yeah. And then when they kind of like hit like a quiet period, the father looks at me and he's like, so I'm a coder at IBM. And your child is speaking over my head right now. Right. Yeah. So you're right. Like they seem to have come into this world almost hardwired for whatever this is. Right.
They have. I tell my kids, my freshmen, that this is their world and that we older people, we're fighting the battles of the past. And where we're at right now and what they see at the national level and the state level and what we're dealing with, I tell them that I'm fighting these battles so that we can get them out of the way so y'all can do what's necessary to fucking save the world, you know, and to create a space of being for yourselves and your progeny so that we can move this entire experiment forward even further into whatever unfathomable destiny that we are facing and headed toward. I'm not one of those who thinks that we're going to destroy the world, we're going to destroy humanity and those type of things. You know, I believe, you know, other things in regards to the nature of what and who we are as a species. But I, as a consequence of that, don't believe in the naysayers and the doomsayers and the dystopian visions that we always see in the movies. I don't think it has to be that way. Although I do think we may go through something that kind of looks like it, and I don't think it's going to look like that forever. You know,
well, I think there's a component of us out there who is like trying to cling on to the way it used to be, right? And like we're not ready for this. And what I believe is happening right now, the joy aside, I believe we're evolving. I think that Homo sapien, as we know it, is becoming something new. Yes. And technology is a part of that.
Yes.
And the new environment is a part of that. And like we were talking about kids, like my kid, like And going back even to my youngest child's conception, I knew that whatever this child was is what I personally consider an evolution above, my doctors call her autistic. And I'm autistic, but her autism and my autism are not the fucking same thing at all, right? To begin with. And what I see, like, her emotional reactions to things are so much calmer, so much more logical, so much full of so much compassion and empathy that I feel like other people, say my age, their emotional reactions don't have that level of compassion and empathy. They're like looking at it through a filter of insecurity and diversion in such a way that, like, things like racism can exist, things like bigotry can exist. My kid doesn't understand those concepts. Like, I remember the first time I brought her to Toronto and she saw her first homeless person. She looked at me and she was like, Dad, like, why is nobody helping this person? I'm like, well, kiddo, like, we see homeless people every day. We're kind of desensitized to it. You can't help everyone. And she just looked at me and she's like, no, that's bullshit. Everyone's important. Everybody is important. Right. And to be honest, like, I've worked with a lot of young people in a lot of different facets, and they all kind of do have that attitude. Right. So despite everything that's currently going on with, like, wokeism, left versus right, fucking sugar-free versus lollipops, all this separation that we're seeing in the world, I'm pretty sure it's like my generation and the oldest ones.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure that when my generation finally dies out, there will probably be, I don't want to say no more of that, but there will definitely be a lot less of that.
Yeah, it'll be a lot different. The world will be a lot different because we lived in a different world. The analog world and the digital world are night and day. The way that we grew up is so different from the way these kids have grown up, connected to the world and connected to each other in ways that we couldn't have even fathomed back when we were their age. And, it's a necessary evolution. And we're moving from a more tribal society to a more global society. And I know that people don't like to hear that, but it's true. And the kids are in a space where they are actually representing that in who they are. It's not strange for them to have friends who they've known for years who live in different countries across the world that they talk to every day, that they game with, and that they know intimately what's going on in their lives. And for us, that was a pen pal back in the day. And you got a letter from them a month, maybe every couple of months, If
you were lucky. Yeah.
And we had to use encyclopedias to learn about different places that were created years ago and were out of date the instant they came to print, And so they have access to the font of wisdom in their back pockets, and that is just a whole nother paradigm of being, So the fact that they spend it on TikTok and on Instagram and that they watch these seemingly inane videos all the time is only an indication of their boredom. An indication that many of them haven't yet found their mission yet, but that mission will find them as the world continues to shift.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really easy to naysay about all of that because of the way that our generation came up. It's really easy to be like, oh, these kids aren't outside playing. These kids, like, they're not having face-to-face. Sure, I mean, you're not wrong to say that, but evolution has to happen. Right. And evolution doesn't give a fuck what you want. Right? Like, it doesn't care what I think human race should become. Right. Like my version of what I think that should become. Evolution doesn't care. Evolution knows what it's doing. And obviously, I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious that this evolution is driving the digital era.
Right. Right. And we don't have any indication now in any of our media or any of our science where it's headed. And we can't look forward with our limited resources and our limited capability to access, the type of technology that can give us more accurate understandings of what's coming, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so as far as the mass population is concerned, it seems like we're headed towards something dark and negative, when I don't believe that's the case at all. In fact, it seems to me that all evidence is pointing toward the opposite. But we're in such a state of transition right now. It's like we're in the midst of the storm, and we haven't reached the eye yet, or maybe we have just reached the eye, but we can still feel the winds around us from the storm. And, we got to pass through that eye to see what's on the other side.
Yeah.
Terrible
I
metaphor,
mean, like,
but what
I can be honest about this and say, I love nature and I love the natural path. And obviously for 200 to 400 years, we've been moving further and further and further away from that. And this evolution that I'm talking about is actually like a further step away from that. But I'm talking about my own personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit here and say that my opinion on where I think humanity should go is the right one. Right. And I think that, proof is always in the result. So like we've been talking about, and I see it in not just my own children, but in other children, they seem to be coming in, and I'm a spiritual person who believes that souls incarnate here for a reason, right? So everyone at home, you can now hear that from me. That's what I believe is going on. And so with that belief, coupled with what I'm seeing, I believe that these souls who are coming in here now are very well prepared for this change. And even though an old soul or an old man like me might want to rail against that change because it's not what I grew up with and it's not my vision for the future, I can still look at it and be like, it's got to be part of nature because there's so much of it. And like me firsthand, I'm very well aware of cultural programming and societal programming and what our elites have done to us in this space, which has led to things. But even with all of that understanding, I still don't believe that our children are a product of that. I think that our children are a product of natural evolution, and that these souls who are incarnating into our children are well prepared for this change of humanity.
Well, I agree with you without qualification. Have you ever read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran?
Yeah.
And so do you know his poem on children?
I know I've definitely read it, but I can't.
Do you mind if I take a few seconds to read it?
Please do.
And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable."
I love that. And like, I hear it all the time because of the work that I do. Like people ask, like, based on everything I know, do I teach my children about that? I don't.
That's right.
Like I don't teach my kids about the occult unless they ask me questions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't teach them esoteric subjects unless they ask me questions, because I've always known, I mean, I can call them my children, but they are not mine.
No, we are theirs.
We are theirs. And they are souls here, just like I am a soul here. They are a level of consciousness here, just like I am a level of consciousness here. And when I look at my own parents, I don't want that kind of control from my parents. So why would I then, put that on my children? That makes no fucking sense. But a lot of parents, they kind of want to do that because in a way we've been conditioned to think of our kids that way.
Yeah.
Like they're like, obviously, yes, they're our responsibility. We need to keep them safe. We need to educate them. We need to like make sure that they thrive. But at the end of the day, their personal development, that's on them. Mm-hmm. Right. And all we can do as parents or as teachers or as politicians is make suggestions, offer tools and points of view, that can help them navigate all those choices as they go.
That's right. And kids see everything and they remember everything. You know, they see things and remember things about us and about their lives that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives, you know. And the way that they grow up is often in some part of the environment that they came up in. And as souls coming in from eternity to manifest in this world without memory of what happened before, those environmental experiences often create blockages, or they create openings for these children to evolve through. And the process of moving through these blockages is the process of spiritual maturation that these souls have to experience as they come into this world. Now, my beliefs do mirror yours, but I also believe in the cycles, the age cycles. And I know that we've come to the end of one great age and we're beginning another great age of tens of thousands of years. And as a new cycle of souls coming in, you know, there are cycles who are also cycling out, right? And so we're dealing with that right now also. We're completing one stage, one phase of a resonance factor, a planetary, solar systemic, galactic resonance cycle that will move to a higher frequency during the next phase, the next cycle that's coming, that's here, right? Depending upon who you listen to in regards to where we are in that process. So we're dealing with so many levels of cycles beginning and ending and coming to fruition, and everybody at every point on this planet, every tradition states that these are these great times. And while we're knowing those types of things, some of us at a conscious level, some in a background understanding, oh, something happened in 2012. Oh, there's a calendar that the Mayans had, right? They, you know, are still living in the throes of transition, you know, and concentrating on the things that almost matter the least, you know, like culture wars and joy and lollipops and things like that, that are, as you said, meant to divide us in these critical times when we really should be concentrating upon our own growth, what we've learned in this past year and a half about who we are and how we want to finish our years on this planet before we pass it on to our progeny.
Well, yeah, and I mean that points us to an obvious factor here, that there is this group that is trying to, let's say, stop that natural evolution from happening.
Good luck.
And they're trying to redirect it in a certain way through their algorithms and through their cultural control in such a way where we separate, we turn against each other. We separate black from white, we separate man from woman, we separate man, woman, trans, gay, straight, blah, 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 from anybody else, right? Like there is this schism in the world that, you know, the people in power, whether it's corporations, whether it's politicians, whether it's, you know, political commenters, they're all trying to push us into this place where we fight against each other. And what I'm looking at personally, I mean, obviously you and I both share this, but like I'm looking at the younger people and I'm like, what is their reaction? Well, I live right across the street from a high school. And like I have actually stopped high school students to have this conversation.
Nice.
And they will tell me the same thing. They're like, no, this isn't driving us apart. This is pushing us together. Like it's literally pushing us in a way where we're starting to look at, you know, the differences between our color of skin as not being differences, the differences in our sexual preferences as not being differences, right? But unfortunately, society is controlled by this older generation who sees a very clear separation between man and woman, who sees a very clear separation between black and white, Asian and black, whatever nationality you want to throw in or race you want to throw in there, sees a very clear separation between lollipop and sugar free. And they're like kind of pushing that. And most of us adults who are in power, we have this like cognitive dissonance going off because of it. And we're fighting with each other and all of that. And to be honest, what I see from our kids is they're going like, the fuck y'all fighting for? Right?
Yeah.
And I think like in a way, we kind of got to get out of their way.
We have to get out of their way. Dang, there's so much to address in that. Let me start, I guess, by giving you an example of the difference. And this is a little bit on the edge, but I'm going to share it with you. So I teach high school English. So I'm in what they call a Title I school district. And Title I is like a poor school district here in the United States. So it's in Central Texas, and it's on the outside of Austin, the big city. And a lot of Black and brown people are being pushed out of Austin because of the price rise, because it's Silicon Hills now, right? And so they're moving out into the hinterlands, into the suburban areas. And Del Valley, the school I teach at, is one of those areas. So I've got a majority of Hispanic kids who live there, and some Black kids from the inner city in Austin, and a few white kids, a small percentage, maybe 8% of the school is white. The majority is Hispanic, and then there's about a 12 to 14% Black population. So these kids, they call each other the N-word interchangeably. No, I mean, they don't base it on race. They base it on, you're my brother, you're my sister, you're my N-word, right?
It's a word, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a word that's an out word, but it's an N-word because hip hop kind of made it that way. But now it's an N-word beyond race because hip hop is old now. And these kids grew up in the context of it. They didn't grow up to see its beginning. Like, I was a b-boy in the early 80s. So I was there at the beginning of hip hop, right? These kids, it's the air in which they breathe, the water in which they swim. And so to them, the racial aspect has been taken out of it. And the inclusion aspect of, you're my culture, you're my person, you're my N-word, right? It's just the way they do it. And us teachers, don't call each other that in my classroom. What are you doing? And if you try to explain it to them, to us, they get offended. Like, no, this word is this, and it means this to us. And then I'm like, yes, to us, to our generation, because we have a different context for that. These kids, they know it in the context of hip hop, which is their culture, no matter what color they are. So this binds them together more than their color binds them together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll be the brave one to actually say that word here. I managed a security team for a number of years, and a lot of my security officers were Black and brown, and I got close with pretty much all of them. And I remember one of them that I was particularly close with being like, "Yo, my nigga," and I was like, I've never been someone's nigga before, and it actually made me super happy. Like, because I knew what he meant. He wasn't calling me a nigga. You know what I mean? Like, clearly I'm a white guy. He's not calling me that. He's using it in a way, it would be like bro or brother or lover or friend or sister or brother or cousin. Like, there's a bunch of different words that we use that mean the same as nigga at this point, right? Yeah. So him being like, you my nigga. Right. And I'm sure there's people fucking cringing at home hearing me say that.
I'm telling you, his family.
But at the same time, he meant I was someone important to him. Right. And my response being, I've never been anyone's nigga before, like that meant a lot for me to say, because I've never been someone's nigga before. Right. And like, growing up where I grew up, I didn't have a lot of the programs and stuff I grew up through. I had a lot of exposure to different races, but like my own like hometown, if you will, it was mostly white kids. Like, we had like a Black kid in our class.
Where's that?
Like, we had like a brown kid in our class, and everybody else.
What town is this?
What's that?
Where are you from?
North of Toronto, just a little bit north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So yeah, like it was a small town, and we didn't have, we had like one gay dude. Right, like we had like one Black dude, we had like one brown.
You knew what that was back then?
Well, that's it, right? It's like, even the difference in gay. Like, I have 2 trans children. Both of my children are trans, right? And so, if you want to call them trans, that's fine. But you can also call them both gay if you want to look at their born genders, because my youngest likes other boys, was born as a boy and lives as a girl, and his girlfriend lives as a girl as well. So like, they're both trans. You could call that gay if you want to, right? And then my oldest is the same, was born female, lives as a male, and has a partner who is female. So are they trans male who is with a female and therefore straight, or are they a gay female? Who gives a fuck? They're human beings who love other human beings.
That's
and
right.
I think that younger generation is going to be the generation who finally hammers that home. I think our generation is having a really fucking hard time with this, because we look at biology and we look at, like, you know, the X, Y, and Z of things, and we're like, okay, men are men, women are women. Okay, great. I get that. But at the same time, people are people. And it doesn't matter whether, exactly. It doesn't matter if you're born with black skin or white skin, if you're born with a penis or a vagina. You should get to make whatever decisions you want to make.
Right. And
it should not be in question. And I think our generation, or maybe my generation, because I think I'm a little bit younger than you,
You're on the cusp.
Yeah, is like literally the last one who like actually looks at the world this way.
We are.
Right. My generation is becoming the politicians and becoming the lawmakers and becoming the policymakers and all of that. They're taking over society. I get that. So we do still have a period to let my generation die off.
Yeah, the boomers have held on for way too long. They have not given up the reins. And so they pretty much cut into the Gen X time of ruling the world and whatnot, right? They just
we still are, right? Like,
yeah,
it's still the boomers. Like,
it's still the boomers.
Joe Biden is pooping his pants in front of the Pope. You know what I mean? Like, that's the world we live in.
No,
right?
go home.
We live in a world where the United States president can't finish a sentence without sounding like a fucking crazy person. That's the world we live in, which comes straight out of Revelations. If people haven't read the Bible, where like the world elite, the elect, as they put it in the Bible, will appear insane.
Yeah,
we're there, right? And people like to look at like the apocalypse or Revelations in the Bible as like an end of times. No. It's a change of times.
Change of time, apocalypse, the unveiling.
Exactly. The world isn't going anywhere. Like, this planet will exist with or without us, right?
That's right. George Carlin view.
Yeah, it's us who have to adapt, and the planet's changing. And so we have a choice right now. Do we adapt to that change? Or do we try to manufacture that change and lead to the destruction of us all?
That's right. That's right.
Choose wisely.
I try to follow the science as much as possible. And I look at what's going on our planet. I look at the warming that's happening in some places, the cooling that's happening in other places, the rising of the oceans at every place around the planet, the melting of the ice caps. And I look at what's going on in our solar system and the changes happening, how Saturn is fucking getting hit by asteroids every couple of years, gigantic asteroids, and wondering what's going on Pluto out there with the atmosphere jetting out and all this crazy shit that's going on everywhere that people are just not paying attention to. And, you know, then I'm coming back here and I'm listening to people tell me, oh, it's all about, you know, our plastics, and it's all about, you know, our cars on the road. No, we're in something much, much greater than that. We're in something that has to do with our movement through the galaxy, you know, with the galactic plane, and, you know, with whatever's going on with our sun, which is our indicator that we all need to watch like a fucking hawk from now on out. And these are just realities that I try to not teach people about, but show them that, hey, you need to look in this direction. Because as far as teaching adults is concerned, I don't do that. I just show them what I'm interested in and hope by learning and seeing what I'm looking at, that they'll look at it on their own and kind of broaden their own understanding that, hey, there's a lot of different things occurring in what are seemingly different areas that need to be synthesized and understood for the greater pattern. And I include amongst that your discussion about transhumanism early and how we're evolving into something else, something that's not just biological, but something that also includes a digital and a mechanical aspect that will become a lived reality for our children and their children. And these are the issues that are of the most import. And yet these are the issues that we only see addressed in our science fiction movies, which often act as soft disclosure.
Yeah. And I think that, like, you know, I think it would be like spiritualists, if you want to call them that, who would be like the first to kind of recognize or maybe approach any of those dynamics but they're also the worst possible candidate to approach any of those dynamics.
Right.
Because a lot of them are looking at
Boo-boo.
it based on an ideal that they have, as opposed to just accepting reality as it is.
Yeah, so finding that balance is really difficult in any population and with any humans, because most of us are not balanced humans. And I think that you are, from my experience of you, and you're a rare male in that sense. And we are rare males in that sense, that we have a balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And we can express those sides and feel that compassion, yet also at the same time come with that alpha male aspect on the other side, if necessary and when necessary.
Dude, I will rip your throat out.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, I'll hug you, I'll love you, of course, but like, give me that opportunity, I will tear your throat out. No problem.
And people don't understand that. They've never understood that fully with you, right?
Well, yeah, the aggressional side of that, like me saying I will tear your throat out, that's toxic masculinity. Like, how dare I say something like that? But no, fuck you. If you're gonna try and hurt my child, I'm gonna rip your throat out. If you're going to try and hurt somebody that I care about, I'm going to rip your throat out. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I love you. Great. Like, don't try to hurt someone around me, and you won't have to have your throat torn out. It's pretty simple.
And this can lead us into societal norms and shaming as far as morality is concerned, and different understandings of what that means, and different populations putting their norms on other people who don't come from the same place they come from or understand reality the same way that they understand reality. And it's an impossible task to try to create one set of reality standards that everybody on the planet has to conform to.
Absolutely.
And it's an illusion that can happen. And the fact that some people believe that that's what's occurring, shows how easily they are distracted by this illusion from the reality. And it keeps us, in this realm of samsara, in this realm of illusion, and fighting each other and in the separateness, because we actually think there are sides when there are no sides when it comes down to it.
Well, exactly. We're all on the same boat at the end of the day, right? Like, we all have to deal with the same society. We all have to deal with the same version of reality. We have this collective consciousness that conjures this realm that we live in, and we're all a part of it. Yeah. We need each other. We need to do this together. I know many people would be like, oh, if I just had my way, the world would be great. No, it wouldn't. And that's just not the way things work. So I think that as much as it's like, this joy stuff is, in my opinion, nonsensical bullshit that has been blown way out of proportion, I think it's still a part of the evolutionary process.
Yes.
I think that in a way, it's a tool that we can use to see just how broken the old way is, and how that old way will not sustain us moving into the future. And in a way, I think that like people who are, let's say, in fear of the joy are that Neanderthal to the new Homo sapien. Right? Like it just look at history. Like even as I've talked about history politically with, say, Nazis and Jews and what's repeating now, let's go even further back between Homo sapien and Neanderthals.
Denisovan.
Exactly. Or Denisovan, or what was the other one? The Hobbit ones, the one in Isle of the Forest.
Homo florenzensis, or something like that.
Like, quite clearly, our version of human pushed out at least 2 different species of humanoid that we knew. And they did it because,
true history.
Exactly. And they did it because they believed the Neanderthals were dangerous and unsafe. And they believed those Hobbit people were dangerous and unsafe. They even spouted rhetoric like they had a disease, they had a virus, and if you caught it, you would die, right? Nazis did the same thing with the Jews during World War II, right? Like they made people believe that they were diseased, that they were pariahs, that they were lepers, and pushed side out. And the Neanderthals didn't just die out. We fucking killed them.
We did.
Right? And the ones that we didn't kill ran out into the forests and into like unpopulated parts of society or parts of the planet, and eventually kind of died out on their own. But we're seeing it all. The stage is set for exactly that to happen again. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing from the majority of people is a total let's kill off the Neanderthals, right? Where, I mean, today we can probably look at history and be like, it'd be really cool if we had a few of those Neanderthals around so we can understand what they actually were, right?
Right. Right. I'm looking at that from the level of politics and from the level of globalism versus nationalism, right? And again, with the polarity aspect, you know, and there are aspects of both that are true and real and that will be maintained and will be a part of the human family moving forward, regardless of what we believe now, you know? So for me, these ideologies are just that. And I like what Krishnamurti said about ideology. So if you follow any sort of ideology or fucking formal religious system, then you're lost for the most part, because you have relegated yourself to a static viewpoint of reality. And reality is so far away from static. Reality is so dynamic, the only constant being change, that purposefully taking yourself out of the game is choosing illusion, you know, choosing samsara over understanding reality and being prepared for it. And I think that's the main reason why we are where we are right now. But it's also the main reason why I think that this is only a short transitory time frame, because I think the planet and the sun are about to wake us up out of our fucking stasis, you know, so that we're not going to be able to say, oh, things can go back to the way they used to be. No, they cannot.
They can't. No, I think you know, obviously you understand, maybe a lot of people watching this don't understand my viewpoint on this, but like I do believe that there is a group of people who has understood all of this for a very long time and has been preparing for society for this. And, you know, I don't think that preparation was adequate. Let's put it that way. And I think we're all a little bit more fucked because they didn't prepare us properly. But because they didn't prepare us properly, we also have this window or this doorway that, you know, people like myself and maybe yourself can walk through, which doesn't follow an agenda on either side and is literally just, let's see nature run its course, right? And to be honest, that's all I want out of this. I want to see what happens if humanity is left the fuck alone. Right? Like, let's see what humans do when they're not influenced or coerced into something. Let's see what humans do when it's literally just one human versus another human, not a white versus a black, not a Republican versus a Democrat, not any of those titles. It's just a human in front of another human. What do? Well, let me tell you what they do. They love each other. They understand each other. They grow compassion for each other. They have empathy for each other. I mean, what story do you need to hear? Do you need to hear about, you know, World War I, Christmas Day, everybody putting their guns down and all singing and dancing together? Do you want to hear about how they had a major problem during World War II with people shooting over the heads of each other because they didn't fucking want to kill other humans? Like, what do you want to hear? Do you want to see this viral video of this little boy supposed to smash this pinata but doesn't want to because it's a Spider-Man pinata and he loves Spider-Man? Nice. Like, what do you need to see to understand that human nature is not black versus white? It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not man versus woman. It's human nature. And we can coexist here and we can solve the problems that we have, whether it's homelessness, whether it's crime, whether it's the joy. We have all of the tools available to us to solve these problems. Why we don't is we're too caught up in fighting over, dude, you're black, I can't be your friend. You know what I mean? Like, how fucking ridiculous is that? You're a beautiful man. And if I had that opinion that I was like, fuck black people, I wouldn't know how beautiful you are. And that would be fucking gross. And that would like ruin my life in a way. My life would be less enriched if I didn't know you. And so if I had even an ounce of racism in me, if I believed that agenda, wouldn't know you, and my life would be less than.
Blessings, brethren. You are my spirit brother. We know this.
Right. Yeah. So aside from all of this, everything we've talked to, what are your hobbies? What are you into?
Well, I'm a musician. I play the saxophone. I also make beats and sing and do spoken word poetry. I am a writer. I've got a science fiction novel out there. I'm about to write another novel. I've got something kind of running around in my head that I want to get down. I'm also working on a script and just trying to keep my creative side awake. And it's funny because in recent weeks and months, it's been coming more to my mind to keep that alive and to bring that out. I guess it's been boiling up. It's been coming up inside of me to be more creative because I have to have that balance. And, I've been so involved in the politics in recent years and running for office, which has been wonderful as far as getting out and meeting people and being met and sharing understandings, which go to what you just spoke of how we cross the political divide by getting out there and fucking talking to each other and getting to know who we are beyond what other people say or what the media says or what your group says about other types of people, And so all of these things come down to basically being human, and creating in each moment and being as real as possible. My own spiritual practice is basically not humanistic in the ideological way, but humanistic as in our way of loving fucking people. We love people, period, and love to know who people are. So we're humanist in that sense of loving who we are in all of our diversity and all of our expression. So learning how to do that more intimately and learning how to listen more and be still more and to allow what's trying to come through within me so that I can more accurately express whatever my purest intent is during these times has been my focus, I guess you could say, in these recent months coming forward. It's been really, really exciting. It's been really, really dramatic and unsettled, the word I used earlier. And so there's been a lot of ups and downs in the last months and years, to be honest, right? And I think that they've just gotten even more intense in recent months. And so trying to find peace and navigate through all of this while remaining clear and trying to find my purpose even more clearly has been where I'm at. So I guess that's kind of a hobby, kind of clearing the self of the things that distract and that aren't expressions of, what I want to be and who I want to be in the world.
I've been doing podcasts for a long time now. And one of the biggest challenges with podcasting, I find, is like wrapping them up. And so what I've learned to do is wait for a statement like that. We're done. We're done. Brother, thank you very much for doing this. I fucking love you. And
love you too.
I'm very grateful that you took the time to talk to me and everybody listening today.
Thank you so much. It's been good talking to you, man.
All right. Everybody at home, goodbye. We'll see you later.